It is wonderful to see you. I am your next veteran in the Senate, and I have big shoes to follow. So thank you for everything you have said today. It is, as you know, spot on. We really need to look after those that choose to serve, whether it's with the Canadian Armed Forces or the RCMP or any of our first responders. And Mr. Thorne, thank you for all the work that you've done. If I can, I'd like to sort of target the conversation on psychedelics very specifically. And it kind of goes back to both of you have made comments about culture. I can only speak for the Canadian Armed Forces, but we come from a culture of obedience. And we know that whether you're talking about the Arbor report and the concept of consent, that consent can be a very challenging domain when it comes to rigidly hierarchical power-based structures such as militaries and police forces can be. So when we're dealing with psychedelics, which are still in the research phase, and we start talking about them in the context of veterans, this is the culture that they come from, or serving members. I think one of the things that I think about is, can they truly give consent when it's in the research phase? So I really appreciate, Mr. Thorne, your comments on looking at policy and structure and what can government do in terms of this. And I would really like, actually, from both of you to get your perspectives on how we can advise on creating the right policy framework rather than targeting veterans as a subject group. How can we better do it so we truly do protect their best interests while truly giving them consent in order to move forward with this type of therapy, because we know it's needed. Thank you.
Would you like me to start?
Oui, monsieur.
I think your point is absolutely correct that informed consent is a difficult component in research, but particularly for veterans who exist in such a strong organizational and hierarchical structure. It's perhaps a difficult question to answer. I think, certainly we've experienced it when we deliver programs for veterans and we ask them, hey, would you mind filling out this survey, or would you mind telling us about your experience? And we always have to be very, very clear. This will in no way affect your ability to participate, in no way affect, the outcome for you. And it's something that we're well aware of working with veterans. I think perhaps it may be more difficult to research and to have good informed consent if this is taking place for people who are still actively in uniform and may perceive that their participation or the way that they interact with the study could affect their career. That is just a comment off the top of my head. I would have to think more in depth as to whether or not that's accurate. I think that perhaps for veterans who have left that military structure, their employment is independent perhaps from their ability to study, and they choose and volunteer to participate in that study. It seems to me that in that environment you would have a greater sense of informed consent, but certainly it's a difficult component for any research, but in particular for this type of research, given the nature and the effect of the substance. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's actually something that I should have included in my testimony. But yes, the informed consent is going to be an incredibly important piece to get right, and should have government recommendations or policy to bolster that.
Thank you. General Dallaire.
Je pense que vous êtes en mute.
I believe that you are muted.
Allez-y.
Bon, très bien. I think the question is absolutely pertinent to the extent that, in fact, the military, then using that as a reference point, is still a very male-dominated, egocentric, and probably misogynist organization. There is no proof that has significantly shifted. And yeah, there's inroads done, but I would argue that the culture in there is one that they have an operational leadership style, which is achieve the mission no matter what and so on, but not a garrison under societal leadership style that would in fact permit the flexibility that people need in order to be able to participate in full cognizance with no retribution and no commentary to the advancement of things like, in fact, the new drugs or whatever instruments that we want to bring forward to assist them ultimately in being more effective and reducing the level of casualties later on. I tend to hold veterans today accountable as myself that we should be doing more in assisting the research in order to reduce the level of casualties in the future, because things are still going to get more complex and ambiguous in the future. And so we should be encouraged to participate in the research and advance that. And in the Canadian Forces, there is it's nearly like an abuse of the operational essentiality context of leadership versus a leadership that has got the flexibility to be more bienveillant, much more aware of the human being individually, that is not necessarily in an operational context, but that is being prepared for that, and also that is living within that sort of profession. That side of the house just doesn't exist right now, and that's why there is a need for reform in the leadership philosophy of the forces.
Merci